Good day everyone and welcome to another tutorial. Today we will be talking about Cycles Toon shading again. In this video I'll be taking it a lot further than the previous video. You could see the previous video as sort of like a quick tip about just how to apply it. In this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to apply it as well as add specularity and do the hairband that I usually do in my anime toon shading. One of the advantages of doing it in Cycles is that you have the advantage of using the GPU instead of just the CPU. This does give you a slight speed advantage depending on the type of card that you have. In my case it's only slightly faster than my CPU, so it's not really beneficial for me to use it. So let's get started. So I want you to add a few monkeys, 4 to be exact. One for with specularity, one without, and I want you to add 2, one for the horizontal hairband and one for the vertical hairband. So just switch this to individual and rotate them 90 degrees. This is just so you can see the roundness of the head. Okay, what I'm also going to be doing is I'm also going to be doing an eye, so that you can see the application of specularity with the normal diffuse toon shading. So we're going to be adding a UV sphere as well. So what I'm going to do is just smooth it out, and I'm only going to be unwrapping one side of the eye. And I'm going to be showing you why specifically only one side after I've selected it and making sure it's only the one side. Okay, and this side as well. That's the whole thing. Okay, now press U, select project from view bounds. Let's just get rid of that. Now you see that's the front side of the eye, that's the side that we really want. Now if you select everything, you will see that it creates a little dot over there. This is because the back side of the eye is going to be located everything in this little area over here. When you use a quadratic sphere texture based in the gradient texture in Cycles, you will find that it stops here and everything else is pretty much extended. So that makes everything on the back of the eye the same color as this area over here. That's why we're doing it like that. So let's close this for a moment. Okay, the eye is going to be last, so let's just hide that for the moment so it's not interfering. Okay, first Suzanne is without specularity, so let's just call this toon shading, no specularity. You use a toon shader, toon BSDF, you can change the size. Let's give it a nice bluish color. I used blue when I practiced this. Just add a plane so you can have a color comparison. Just below the monkeys, let's call this one floor. And this one can just receive a normal diffuse BSDF shader, and let's make it a slight green. Just color the viewport stuff as well. Makes it easier to distinguish. Okay. Now we need to go into our node materials. As per usual, I just want to sit home. Okay. Now you immediately notice that there's a lot of soft shadows once I press rendered. And I add a sun as well. I deleted everything so that we have to add everything from scratch. Okay, we want a really steep angle, very, very steep, approximately like that. And slightly onto the monkeys, like that. Okay, make sure the emission is normal. You can just use 1. Cast shadow has to be on, and the size has to be 0.001. Otherwise, it still gives you a slight softness. Okay, that looks nice. But you'll see that this is not the only solution. I want to show you what it does. Now look at the toon shading. You can see the toon shading is quite hard. Now if you say you use 0.01 instead of 0.001, you'll see that there's still a very soft rim there. So it has to be 0.001. But you'll see we still have these indirect light bounces. That's simply fixed in our render settings. You go under sampling. You can even set this down to 5 if you want to. Volume sampling, you can ignore light paths. This is the one that you want to turn off. These you can leave on, but for the most part it's kind of useless to leave them on once you've turned this down. Transparency, I would recommend you just leave at 8 if you're going to be using transparency in your scene. Okay, that's fine. Performance, I don't know if these are really going to make much of a difference, but whatever, it's fine. Compositing is not going to be needed. Freestyle is, but you don't add that until you're done. And we should be good under render settings. Okay, now I'm going to be using CPU instead of GPU here because I'm recording, and that's using the graphics card as well. So that's easier at the moment. Okay, and let's go under the world settings and go under ray visibility. Turn off everything except camera and transmission. Once you do that, and you've turned down all the extra samples, and you render this, you'll see that it's completely black, the shadow part. So even if you zoom in, it's still dark and black. So what you simply need to do here is just turn on ambient occlusion and turn it way down. I usually use about 0.24, 0.25. That's what I use in Blender Render as well, and it actually works here too. But just for the sake of some contrast, I'm going to be setting it to 0.2. Okay, under your render settings, there is one more thing that I did adjust for the test, and that is I set the exposure to be 2, and I set the filter type to be box. Now the exposure did make a difference in terms of the brightness of the result. I've noticed that when you render it out and the film exposure is only set to 1, your whites almost become slightly gray. That does not work for me, so that's why I set it to 2. Okay, the rest should still be good, and I am happy with that. Okay, so let's do a quick render over here. Just hit solid. Let's add a camera. Just move it over so that all the monkeys are nice and visible. Set the rotation to be 90, 0, and 0. And let's fit them all nice into the frame. Just like that. That looks good. I see the ambient occlusion is a bit bright for the exposure, so I'm just going to be turning that down to be about 0.1. Let's try that again. Yeah, that's much better. Okay. Let's just up the size for the monkey. I do want to caution you about the Toon shader size. I want to show you what it does. If you turn down the size, it reduces the brightness of this. If you increase the size, sorry, it reduces the brightness of this spot over here. So let me show you. See, it decreases the color. So it's very annoying. I don't know why it does that, but you're just gonna have to work with it as best you can. Okay, so I'm happy with this little monkey because it doesn't have specularity. We are done with it. Select this little monkey. Select the same material. It's just going to be modifying it. It's easier. And just say with specularity. Okay, for this one you are going to need to go into your material. It's not straightforward enough to just click there. Now I want you to add an add shader. Duplicate your Toon BSDF. Instead of diffuse, set it to glossy. Click add. Make it, you can change the color if you want to. I don't think it's necessary. Let's see the result first. Yeah, we have to change the color. We have to make it a little bit brighter. Let's make it white and just reduce the size. And there you go. And it actually does work. So let me show you if you rotate around it. See? It's not like a fake type of specularity that's static. It actually works with the light. But I do caution you about geometry though. Let me just reduce, take the floor out and move back behind the head of the monkey. You see what it does there? Creates these jagged edges. That's because of the geometry. But this should not be a problem typically. I mean, if you're like head on it shouldn't be a problem. It's more when you go like over the edge like that. Okay, that's fine. So that's basically how you add specularity. You can color this. Let's make it like the same blue color. Let's increase the size like that. And if you want to, you can just make it a little bit easier to control the brightness by adding a mix shader. And you can reduce it like that as well. And that looks good. If you look at it like that, it's like a 3-tone. Anyway, that's pretty much toon shading with specularity in Cycles. So now I'm going to be showing you how to add the light band. Now when I do the light band and most of the toon shading that I do, I don't use specularity. The only thing that usually gets specularity would be the eyes. They get specularity, and of course the teeth. And areas that are usually wet get specularity, such as the inside of the mouth, you know, the gums, the inside of the cheeks, that sort of stuff. You know, even the tongue gets some specularity. But in this case, the hair does not. It just gets the hairband. So I'm just going to be making this hairband 1. And we are still going to be using our toon shading. But in this case, we are going to be adding a texture to the color area. So let me just get that texture. It's a gradient texture. And we need coordinates. We want it to be reflection. And of course we want mapping. And just get our color ramp. I want to get this color right. Okay, that's good. Now set it to constant. I want that color, and of course I want this color as well, and then we make this one white. That looks good. I can stick that in there, and if you activate it over here, you will see that it looks like that. Now this is the vertical one. This is absolutely fine. If you're happy with that, then that will work. Remember, you use this type of line whenever the hair goes this way predominantly. But you're welcome to move the gradient over. You see? It's very nice. And the second one, just going to be adding that same material to it. And the only thing we'll do is we'll rotate it along the y-axis so that it goes horizontally. You can thicken it up though. Okay, see, that looks nice. Let's see what happens if I move this around. Oh, okay, so you can move it on the z-axis. That's very cool. A little bit more control there. I do caution you that if you were to move it, it sticks, but if you were to rotate it, it does not stick. So just bear that in mind. The reason it does that is because we're using reflection and not some sort of a direct object mapping. So that is that. And now for the eye. So let's bring our sphere back and call it eye. Eye. And let's give it the specularity material. It's just easier. Toon shading eye. Okay, the specularity is going to have to be white. And of course the toon shading is going to have to be white at first. Let's just make the viewport color white as well. Okay, it looks nice. Let's check that out under render. There we go, very nice. If you want to, you can just increase the size slightly, not too far. As you can see, it creates those jagged edges we talked about earlier. And this specularity has to be a lot smaller. That looks nice. Okay, add your texture coordinates, add a converter node. I'm not converting a color ramp node from the converter category. And of course, our mapping, because we're using UV. Let's go constant. Now this one is basically only our mask. Think of this as defining the iris. So what you can do is you can just add a mix node in here, make this black, and the other one you can make white. So you just know which goes where. And then we also need to add a blend texture. That's the part I forgot. So a gradient texture, sorry. And it should be to quadratic sphere. Now, as you can see, I have not adjusted anything under the mapping yet, because I wanted you to see what it does when I do that. So you find it here in this corner over here. Now the reason for that is when you look at the UV mapping, it looks approximately like the border is in relation to the circle or the sphere. Just make it slightly bigger. The circle, the quadratic sphere, starts at this point over here, so you have to move it halfway across and halfway up. You do this by 0.5 and 0.5. Simple as that. Now you can see the eye right up front. Okay, add another color ramp. This one will be for the black areas in the eye, so that will be under the white. Stick it in under the white and see what it does. Just want to add okay, so that has to be black. Okay, let's add another color ramp because this one is for the eye color itself. So set that to ease, get rid of that last one. We'll be using the same texture except on linear, also UV. Sticking that in there, and we are going to fetch this. And set the Z to 90 degrees and reduce this to 0. So you have proper control over it. Okay, let's put that approximately there and switch these two up. Okay, that looks good. Approximately there should do the job. Let's get rid of that, it's not needed. A nice beautiful eye. Did I add the mapping? Yes, I added the mapping, that's good. And let's just color the eye a little bit. Let's make it a nice greenish blue. Saturation has to be a little bit down. It looks very nice. Now one thing I've noticed is that because you increase the size, it makes this very gray. I'm not a big fan of that gray color. So what I typically do is I just up the RGB of this to be about 2. That just makes it a little bit brighter without affecting any surrounding shapes. The only thing it does affect is the specularity, but that you saw already anyway. So that is basically it. Now all you need to do is you just need to add Freestyle and add the floor back. Like so. And let's get the eye into the frame. Okay, that's nice. Turn on Freestyle, take off the border. Now you guys already know my Freestyle settings. It's really nothing fancy. It's just my default stuff with a line thickness of about 1.1. I am going to increase it in this case to be 1.5 because I just want the lines a little thicker for the example. moving this over, moving the floor over, and pushing it into the background. Okay, and then hitting render. And there you have it. Specularity, hairband, and a practical example in the form of an eyeball. Okay everyone, now let's get to part 2 of the tutorial. Now part 2 is basically just me showing you how to apply smooth shadows with your toon shading elements within Cycles. I want to tell you first though that the principle for using this means that we're going to have to render everything twice. Once with a hard light source and once with a soft light source. It sounds a lot more impractical than it really is, but I'm sure you will find that as we go along that it's really not as bad as it sounds. So let's get started. As you can see, I have a basic scene set up here with 2 planes. These are equipped with a normal noise texture that will just give us a blotted shadow or dappled shadow if you want to describe it. As you can see, we have our basic lamp set up to cast smooth shadows. This would be the equivalent of a normal sun lamp being added. I use a very low sample count, as you can see over here, just so that we have some speed while recording as well. You can also see that I'm using CPU instead of GPU. Okay, this is fine. I just want to start with the render layers. I think that's a good place to start. So set your first one to be Freestyle, because that's where your default Freestyle settings will be active. As you can see, mine is. Just want to show you the line thickness is 1.1, same as in Blender Render. So what I want you to do is I want you to select the layers that contain all your scene elements, and I want you to define 1 or 2 layers that you want your lighting to be on exclusively. I'm going to use these 2 layers over here. So I'm going to be selecting the top one for Freestyle, adding another layer, calling it background, and I'm going to add its light source in the bottom one. So that means we have to exclude the opposite. So that will be the case over there. Now we don't need masking in this case because we are going to be using material index to do our masking for us. So that looks good so far. Now on the Freestyle layer, you only need a maximum of about 4 samples. On the background, you need a minimum of 15. You can go slightly lower, but I would definitely not recommend it. You can turn off hair. That you need to leave on. On Freestyle, you can turn off environment and hair at the moment. Let's add material index. And that looks good. Now, something that occurred to me after I recorded this tutorial initially is that with this alpha threshold feature, you can add the lines that Freestyle miss because of its relation to geometry. In other words, you can create outlines based on depth, and you can create outlines based on the normals of your objects. So if you use this alpha threshold feature, you will be able to do that, because what it does is it enables the depth pass to see through objects if they have a transparent texture on them. So as it is set right now, it's not supposed to render anything that has a transparent shadow, a transparent texture. So let me just quickly render this out so you can just see. Okay, that looks nice. So going to the node editor, and I'm going to select the Z pass, and I'm going to add the normalize so you can see there. Okay, now you can see it's pitch black. Whereas if you turn it on and you render this again, see, it's completely transparent and you still have these. Now if you have this on, it affects your Z, your index, your normal, your UV, and your vector passes. Now the index would be like material index and object index, which will again allow you to add Freestyle lines where it may have been missed by the Freestyle system itself because it's geometry based. So that's just a tip there. Okay, so let's get back to the normal tutorial. If you want to, you can actually skip using Freestyle and only use these if you're concerned about having black lines that cut through your shapes. But that's just a heads up. You don't have to do that. But I'm going to show you how to create lines based on the Z and the normal. So I'm going to select those. Let's turn this off over here. Vector is not needed. Material index is not Freestyle. That looks good. Now some of you who have watched my other tutorials on toon shading would realize that I have not ticked ambient occlusion. The reason I didn't tick it is because the shadows do not respond the way they do in Blender Render. In Blender Render, if you tick ambient occlusion and you have your world settings set to smooth and all that other fun stuff, it still gives you ambient occlusion. Cycles does not. In Cycles, our ambient occlusion actually forms our global illumination, so it's just not going to happen for Cycles, so that's okay. The background we already set to 15. We've got some basic stuff here. We just need to set up our lighting. Okay. So I have defined the background light to be here. So I'm going to move this lamp there right now. This will be our soft sun. Just rename that. Sun soft. And I'm going to duplicate this. Set a constraint. Oh, I just have to rename it. Sun hard, and I just want to rename this one to be soft space. Okay. Sorry, I'm a little finicky about details. Okay, the hard one will be 0.301. This is to ensure that it's sharp enough. So we just need to add a constraint, like I said, copy rotation of the soft sun, because this one's the hard sun, and move that to our other light layer. And that should be good. Okay. Now under your render settings, under sampling, make sure that it uses layer samples. And make sure that square samples is not ticked, because if it is, it's going to be slower. Volume sampling, I don't use that because I'm not using volume in this scene. The transparency, I'm only using 2 bounces. That's what I typically get in Blender Render, so I'm happy with that. These other bounces are all set to 0. Shadows have to be enabled. Motion blur is off. On film, I use Gaussian with a width of 1. It's slightly faster than 1.5, but it's not faster than just selecting box. Box is the same as Gaussian with a width of 1. At least in the tests I've done. On viewport, you can select dynamic or static BVH. Static BVH takes longer to build, while dynamic BVH is quicker to build, but static BVH renders faster. So it's totally up to you depending on your scene size what you want to do. So I just use spatial splits. It says that it takes a longer build time, but it renders faster, so I just leave that on. And of course compositing, because we're going to be making toon shading, and your freestyle has to be turned on as well, if you prefer using freestyle and not creating the outlines yourself. Okay, select your 3 layers that we have active. That looks good, and render it out. That looks wonderful. Now if you go node, you can now go ID mask. That looks really cool. Set it to 4 because that's what I defined them as. You can find that under your settings, under your material, pass index over there. I ticked homogeneous for the simple reason that the render does go faster even if there is no volume in the scene. It's not a huge difference, but there is a difference, so it all adds up. So that's good. Go color mix and add this in there. Now as you can see, this literally cuts off the freestyle outline, which is not a problem in this case because we want to make the background black first. Okay, that looks good. And the way that we make sure that we include outline when we are going to use the background layer is to simply blur this over itself on a very low number, just to create an outline. So that will be our new factor. Make sure you clamp it, otherwise it goes above 1 and then it looks ridiculous. We're going to have to use the top value, make this black, and set this to about 15, and blur the inputs. Both of them have to be blurred, by the way. And set this to 0.15. And now if you insert this, you'll see that you don't get any green outlines, but you do get a nice black mask over it. You can also then use this one, this particular mask, as your result. There you go. And that is basically it. That's how you combine soft shadows with proper toon shading in Cycles. Now, I promised to show you guys how to create outlines based on your Z-pass and your normals. So I'm going to quickly show you how to do that. I just want to save it, and I want to turn off Freestyle for the sake of geometry. So let's say we have our plain square over the monkey. And we have Freestyle turned on. And you just see, okay, background doesn't need this. Freestyle does. It's turned on all the way. And if you render that, this happens. You can see it cuts off. And you get this additional black outline. Now this additional black outline might not irritate you unless it goes over your toon shaded object, which is why I recommend turning Freestyle off if this is what you're going to be doing. So I'm going to be turning it off, and I'm going to be re-rendering only the Freestyle layer because that's the only one we need. Okay, that looks good. Now if you go into a node editor, this is the disaster you see. And the reason it does that is because we have just used our ID mask to separate it out and create that mask we have just seen. Which is not a bad thing, but it's not ideal. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding a blur node, a mix node, set it to difference. You can select your normals, put that in there, and then your normal below that. Set again to fast Gaussian, relative, 0.15. This is where you can usually adjust it until you get the results you're looking for. So I can just show you what that looks like. And you see it creates this rainbowish type appearance, which is really nice. Go mix, add a mix node in there, don't connect it just yet. First we need to invert our colors. And we need to convert it to black and white, which is under converter, RGB to black and white. And then you can multiply this over itself. Don't be afraid to set the value quite high, maybe about 5 or 10. You can add a slight blur node in here again, very slight, 0.1 max. And you can multiply that over itself again as well, just not as strongly. Something like that should do the trick. Now, what you can also do is you can take this original value and multiply that over the blur result of, let's say, 0.15. So it is a bit higher. 5 is a bit strong. Let's go. Yeah, 1 looks nice. Okay, if you want to, you can sharpen this up so that there are less bright areas in between. Set this to ease. A little further. Something like that looks okay. And do the exact same thing with the Z-pass. So I'm going to just be selecting all of this. Duplicate on the Y.